All right, I've got to share an AI Max test result on comparing the impact of the brand inclusions versus URL inclusions and a page feed. So one of the things that got me most excited about the potential of AI Max for e-commerce was when they released these, again, brand inclusions and URL inclusions. Now, when I say inclusions, that's what's probably a bit shocking to you because most people don't want brand and included. But I'm talking about, and this is in the context of a reseller of other brands. So I've got an example of a client that sells high-end kitchen knives, chef's knives, right? And they sell all kinds of other brands from all over the world, mostly Japan and Germany, that have big demand in the US, and other stores also sell. So when I saw brand inclusions and URL inclusions, I thought, okay, this is finally a tool that can help steer the ship for the DSA component of AI Max. I want it to be able to focus in on a brand's URLs to deliver to granular searches and it not just be a broad match keyword. So this is what I started testing. Now, right out of the gate, I started with brand inclusions. And brand inclusions, for the most part, nailed it. Like it got me the results. Every ad group is focused on a specific brand, and I just have a couple keywords with the search term matching on. So, they're broad match technically. And I would add the brand inclusion. And right out of the gate, like these ad groups are 100% serving brand relevant search terms going to brand relevant URLs. Except, obviously, for the ad groups where I could not add a brand inclusion. If you haven't added a brand inclusion yet, it's a little bit tricky because it's not just type in the name of the brand. It is type in the name of the brand and select a URL that Google has found that belongs to that brand. And it'll give you like a huge list of all kinds of stuff. It'll find blog posts about the brand. It'll find pages from other websites about the brand. But you want to find the brand's URL. Now, it struggles to do this for really small brands. So in this example, I had this client sells boutique knife makers, right? Small companies in the mountains of Japan that sell their knives all over the world. There's a big demand for these knives here, but they don't really have well, they have a website, but Google couldn't find it on this brand inclusion. I would even put the website in there, couldn't find it. And I've had this in other accounts as well, where the brand inclusion tool has some holes. You can't have a brand inclusion all the time. So I've got an example of 4 ad groups, right? 1, no brand inclusion, and 3 others with brand inclusions. The one with no brand inclusion only got about a 50% search term brand relevancy, where half the search terms had nothing to do to the brand. They had to do with other brands on the store that were matching to URLs of other brands on the store. So I could see the DSA component was going all over the place, and it was getting conversions for those searches of other brands in this ad group. Now, the website has way too many brands and URLs for me to try to control this with URL exclusions. So I thought, okay, I am going to do URL inclusion because from what I understand, if you do URL inclusion or a page feed, which I tried both, it should narrow it to just those URLs. It's supposed to target, kind of like what targeting does for audiences. It targets those URLs. So I first started with URL inclusion, which for all of these 4 brands, I added URL inclusion. And what I did was instead of taking a bunch of URLs, I made a URL rule where I took the brand name that was in all the URLs for that brand and said, any URL that has this brand name, that's what you're going to use as a URL inclusion for this ad group. And for the ad group that had no brand inclusion, 0 change. 0 change. The same percentage over time comparatively to the previous period. Same percentage of search term relevancy, same percentage of URL relevancy. For the other brands that had brand inclusion, I'm sure you could assume no change as well, but those were already getting 100% relevancy. Now, my last test was a page feed, and the page feed I would hope would work in two ways. For the brand that had no brand inclusion, I would hope that it would get better. But more importantly, for the brands that already had good search term relevancy, I would hope the page feed would help steer the DSA into serving more product specific URLs to ad clicks. Because one issue that I found with the results I was getting with the brand inclusion and even after the URL inclusion was the delivery of the URLs were still going to just kind of the collection page. Even if it was a SKU specific search, majority of the deliveries were kind of lazy. They were just going to a collection page, which I want it to go to a product page. If somebody searches for a specific brand and a specific product, I want it to go to that product page and search, similar to what shopping does, similar to the results I used to get in DSA. We would get some, which I was happy about in AI Max, but not that many. So I would assume, okay, I'm going to add a page feed. And again, a page feed is I got the client to send me a sheet with all of the product URLs of these brands. And I loaded those into Google Ads. And I won't get into the specifics of how to do it. There's a lot of really great content out there on how to do it. But more or less, you put this big sheet into Google Ads, and then you give a custom label to the URLs that you want to apply to a specific ad group. And then in your URL exclusion, you add that custom label, and then boom, it's got those URLs. And it's supposed to use that as like, okay, I'm going to like really focus on these URLs to match to queries. And I did a before and after comparison for the campaigns for the ad groups that were getting the good, search relevancy to the brand. Zero change. The almost exact same amount of URL, same amount of product specific URL matching to the search terms. And with the page feed, again, for the ad group that had no brand inclusion, zero change again. So this tells me that one, brand inclusion really works, but I didn't see any difference in URL inclusion for either example of helping steer the ship to better brand relevancy or help steer the ship to more product specific URL delivery, and that's including the page feed. So a little disappointing, but overall, the campaign is still, the AI Max campaign test is still doing pretty well for this client. I can't say it's the same for every client, but in the end, I'm saying, yeah, brand inclusion matters most in this context. But I've seen no impact on URL exclusions, which is a bit of a bummer. So, all right, that's my test result. I'll pass it back to y'all to do your own tests. And yeah, let me know in the comments how they are going. We got to hack this system somehow. All right. See you next time.